Okay, hi everyone. In this video, I decided that I'm going to take just some time and just do some coding. Practice some of the concepts we already know, solve some problems. This video is totally optional. It's really just off the cuff for me. I don't have anything prepared for you. I just thought it might be helpful for you to see how I go about solving some simple problems using the concepts that we've learned so far. And so um, I'm just going to do some coding and you can watch and follow along and see if you can solve the problems just for extra practice. So maybe we can look up some practice loop problems. So practice for loop problems. For loop practice problems in Python. This is SciPy native. Okay, so print out the first 10 natural numbers using a while loop. So this is interesting. Let's grab this exercise here. How do we do this using a while loop? You might be thinking, if you watch my lectures, why are they asking us to use a while loop? I would agree with you here. If I were writing my own code, I'd want to use this, do this using a for loop, because for loops are really good for ranges. Whenever you have this notion of, okay, I'm going to do something this many times, or I want to go through this particular sequence, a for loop is more natural. And so really the way I'd want to do this, the for loop, is I would use range. So for num in range, and here we give range the index that we want to stop at, 0, which is 10. I'm going to go ahead and print num. And notice I've had some students ask me, hey, do I always have to use I here? The answer is no. You can just you can use any variable name you want in a for loop. So here you create this variable. This can be a brand new variable. It can be a variable that already exists. But then inside of the body of the for loop, this is the variable that gets used kind of over and over. So for num in range 10, print num. And why don't we just run this over here on the right? So print main.py. Cool. So that prints out 0 through 10, through 9. Okay, but that doesn't actually solve our problem. The problem said print the first 10 natural numbers using a while loop. Okay, so what do we do with for a while loop? So with a while loop. So remember, a while loop is in this form while condition do something. And this do something part is the body, and we can tell because it's indented. Whereas this condition is kind of the condition that we're going to keep checking for every iteration of the loop, for every repetition of the loop. And so we want this condition, well, we want to keep printing numbers. So let's make some kind of counter. Maybe a counter that we're going to start from 0. And what we can do inside of our body is every time we execute the body of our function, we're going to print out the counter. And then what else do we need to do? So we print the counter. What's the next thing we want to do before printing the counter again? Since we're going up by ones, we want to add 1 to our counter. So we could do counter equals counter plus 1. Cool. But we don't have a condition for when to stop yet. So we're going to, when do we want to stop repeating? At what point? Well, we want to stop repeating after we printed the first 10 numbers. And since we're printing every number that it, for every value of the counter, we're printing once, and we update the value of the counter, we can stop printing when our counter is, so we keep going while our counter is less than 10. So as soon as it hits 10 or gets bigger than 10, we're going to stop. Let's see what happens here. So if we run this code, and I'm going to comment out these lines. And by the way, how do I do this? Quickly, you can select lines of code, and then on your keyboard, hit Command/ to comment a block of code. So for num in range 10, print num. We're going to get rid of that. We're just going to run these lines of code here. Python 3, main.py, and this prints 0 through 9. So here you can see, what if you wanted to start somewhere higher? Instead of starting from 0, say you wanted to start from 5. Well, you could just give the initial value of counter to be 5. And now if you run this code, it'll print 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's say you wanted to stop sooner. Let's say you wanted to print up until 8, but not including 8. Then we just make our stopping condition be counter less than 8. We run our code. Now it prints 5, 6, 7. Now again, you can do the same thing with a for loop. And in fact, I would say the right way to do this is with a for loop. And if you wanted to do 5 up through 8, you would do range 5 going up to but not including 8. And I'll just print a separator line here so we can see the output from our first bit of code to our second. See 5, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7. They both print 5, 6, 7. But since this problem specifically asked for using the while loop, that's what we did. Okay, let's go on to the next problem now. So our next problem, print the following pattern. So 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is a good question. I like this one. There's a few ways to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this into our code. Print the following pattern. And you know what? I'm going to show you something new on this video. Sometimes you want to make a whole block of code, not just a single line. How do we do that? You can use 3 quotation marks to start a block of code, and then 3 quotation marks to end a block of code. And this way, anything inside of the quotation marks, this is the same thing as if you would put the hashtags in front of all these lines. Makes this whole block be commented out. So now I've got this block of code here. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is what we want to print. So we need to write some code that'll print this. Well, one thing I notice here is there's some sort of repetition going on. We print 1, then we print 1, 2, then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And really, this problem does say use the following number pattern. Probably we want to be able to do this dynamically for any kind of maximum number, right? So if someone asked us, we'd want to be able to do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because the really cheap way to print this out, I mean, you could literally do print 1, right? Print 1, 2, print 1, 2, 3, and just print it by hand like this. But we want to write some sort of loop that does this for us, where we can adjust the maximum size. So here's what I propose. Because we have a fixed kind of sequence size, and in fact, why don't we just define a variable? So max num here, we'll say for this sequence is 6. The maximum number here is going to be 6. So we are going to want to repeat 6 times. For I in range 6, we want to do something. Now let's just print a star for now. So just a star. We're going to print it 6 times. We're going to comment out our code up here so it doesn't get run, so it doesn't bother us. Okay, so this printed 6 stars, like we expected. This body gets repeated 6 times. Now, what if we wanted to print kind of a star triangle pattern? This was actually one of your classwork problems. Well, remember, in Python, you can multiply strings because multiplication is just repeated addition. So just like you can do star plus star, and that will print just 2 stars, you can also do star times 5. And that will print out 5 stars because star times 5 is the same thing as star plus star plus star plus, star plus star 5 times. It does the same thing. So we know star times 5 here prints 5 stars. And this is handy because we make this times 20 to print a long line of stars, 20 stars down here. I'll move my head so you can see them here. So that's great. Let's use that here. So instead of printing just 1 star, why don't we make a triangle by printing I stars? So star times I. So we're going to multiply star I times, and if I run this, accidentally put it here, Python 3, and the name of our file is main.py. So this prints a blank line, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars. So we have a triangle, but it's starting from nothing now, right? If I get rid of this print star of 20, fact, let me make this just a little clearer. I'm going to do I, stir I, plus a colon and a space, plus our star pattern here, which I'm going to put in parentheses, just to be very clear about what's going on. So I is a number, then a colon, and then the number of stars. So I run this, and we start from 0. So that's a little annoying because we want to start from 1. So why don't we actually start our range from 1? So going up from 1 up to max num, and let's run our code. What will happen? Okay, so now our count starts from 1, but we only go up to 5. Why is that? Well, because we go up to but not including 6. So if we want to go up to but including this number, we do max num plus 1. And now we have it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, this is all right, but we have a small problem, actually a big problem. We're printing stars instead of numbers. And the output that we want is these numbers separated by spaces. So how do we do that? Well, what if instead of the star, we printed the number? Maybe we did like, oh, I don't know. Okay, so stir I times I. So what does this do here? Stir I converts I, which is our number here, to a string, and then we're going to multiply that string I times. And so see if you can guess. Pause the video and guess what this is going to evaluate to, what we're going to see here when we print this to the screen. We guessed? Okay, let me run it and let's see. So this prints 1 because the string 1 time. Then the second time of the loop, it prints the string 2 times. The third time, the string 3 times, and so on and so forth until we get, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. So this is closer. We now have numbers, and they're kind of in the right triangle, but 1, there's no spaces between them, and 2, there's no the numbers aren't increasing. It's the same number. That's a little frustrating. So what do we want to do instead? What we can do is we can make a string. So we say string that starts off as an empty string. And what if we just append to this string each time? So each time, now string equals string plus the number plus a space. So now every time we enter the for loop, we append the current number of I to the end of this string. So the first time we go through here, and I'm going to go ahead and print out this string each time. The first time we come in here, string is empty, and so we do string equals string plus I, so just the number 1, plus a space. And now we'll see actually, you might be wondering, why do I need the space here? Well, I'm going to get rid of the space, and I'll show you why. Let's run this code. So we actually get the right numbers, 1, then 1, 2. Then at this point, the string is 1, 2. So we add 3, then we add 4, 5, 6, and we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But because we want spaces in between the numbers, we have to add a space on the end so that the next number that we add has a space after it. Run this. We get the pattern that we want. This is great. So this is option 1. We have a solution now that works, but I'm going to show you a different solution. This is the more advanced solution. This is what I would want you to strive for. We can use nested for loops. So maybe you might remember nested conditionals. The same way as we have nested conditionals, we can do nested for loops. So for I in range 1 up to max num, max num plus 1. Notice how for every number, we want to print out starting from 1 going up to that number, right? So if I do for each number, so for row 1, we want just 1. For row 2, we want 1 and 2. For row 3, we want 1, 2, and 3. So really what each of these lines represent, if we could print these one single line as a for loop, how would we do that? So print a single line. This is a good place for a function. I'm using a function here just to show a good example of where it's where you can use one. So def, we're going to call it numLine, and given some stop number, we want to, and I'll put it in a comment here. It's a special, in Python, we sometimes put these comments inside of functions like this. They're called docstrings. This docstring is going to tell us what this function does. This function prints numbers prints a string of numbers separated by by spaces, starting from 1, going up to and including stop number. So for example, let's say the input is, I don't know, 4, means that our output is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's implement the body of this function. So stop number, and I'm going to rename this a little bit. I'm going to call this print numLine. Since we're actually printing here, we're not returning the string, we're going to print it. So what we're going to do is we want to start from number, print stir is going to start off empty, and for num in range starting from 1, going up to stop number, but plus 1, because we want to include that stop number, we're just going to append print stir equals print stir plus stir num plus a space, just for good measure, like this. I'm also going to show you a little shortcut here in this bonus video. Whenever you have like something equals something plus, you can do print stir plus equals. That does the exact same thing. So plus equals is kind of a shortening of something equals something plus blah. So for example, just so for completeness, a equals a plus b is the same thing as a plus equals b. And now at the very end, we're going to print our print stir that we've put together. So now we have a way of printing a number line. And now, instead of keeping track of a variable like we did up here, and I'm going to comment out this code so it doesn't bother us, we can use this function that prints a single number line. You can say, for I in range, max num equals, no, say we want to go up to 10. Max num, starting from 1, going up to max num plus 1, since we want to include it, for every single number where you want to print the number line for that number, going up to stopping at I. And if I run our code here, Python 3 main.py, this does exactly what we want. So 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. We can even do this up to like 20 and see what happens. Probably a big output. Oof. Let's do it with a smaller number, 5. It's just a little easier to follow. Oops. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's grab another problem. So, exercise 3. Calculate the sum of all numbers from 1 to a given number. Okay, let's try that. I'm going to comment this out. I'm not going to comment out this function because it's not printing anything. It's not bothering us. And who knows, maybe we'll need to use it later. So our problem, exercise 3. So let's first get our given number. So max num equals int input enter. Okay. Now, to get a number to sum to, the maximum number, This is a great example of somewhere that we want to use a for loop. Why? Because given a max number, we want to add up the sequence starting from 1, going up to 3, 4, going up to max num, right? I'm going to sum all these numbers together. So given that we're working with a sequence, it's a good place to use a for loop for num in range max num. And it's okay here that we are starting from 0 because 0 doesn't add to our sum. If we want, we can be really precise, start from 1. What's not okay though is that we're going up to max num, but our problem here says calculate the sum of all numbers from 1 to a given number. So we want to include the number that we're stopping at. So from 1 going up to max num, if we want to include max num in our sum, we have to add 1. Now, what are we going to do inside of the body? Well, without a variable to add to, we have no way of keeping track of our sum. So we definitely need some sort of total variable that we can start off at 0. And then for each iteration of the body, when we do total plus equals the num that we just saw. So let's think about how this code runs. So this code will be start from 1, then the next iteration will be 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to the number we're stopping at. And we're going to, in every iteration of the body of the for loop, add that number to the total. Finally, we can print out total is total. Well, let's see this code run. Main.py. Let's say we want to sum to 15. The total is 120. Here's a fun problem. What if we want to sum to some crazy number that you couldn't do on your own? So we want to sum to 750. Can you guess what this will be? I know I can't. I'm not even sure how big this will get, but let's find out. 281,625. Cool. It's a random fact. Okay. So here's another problem. Write a program to print the multiplication table of a given number. So I'll comment this last bit out. Let's take a look. So how do we do this? So the sample input here is num equals 2. And here they want us to print a multiplication table of a given number. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So the multiples from 1 to 10, multiplying this given number from 1 to 10. So what is the sequence? So first of all, we need our input. So the number that's given to us, int input, give me a number. Well, the sequence that we have is 1, 2, 3, up through 10. That's what we're going to multiply our number by. So since we have a sequence, this smells a lot like a for loop. So first think about how do we generate this sequence? Well, this sequence comes from a range that starts from 1, goes up to 10 plus 1, right? So up to num plus 1, because we're going to include num. And by default, it takes steps of size 1, so we don't need to include that third argument here. So we're going to write a for loop using that range. For I in range 1, num plus 1, we're going to print the given number times I. And I realize I have a bit of a bug here. So I said num plus 1. The num that's taken in isn't actually, how many lines of the multiplication table. We always want 10 lines. So we always want to go up to 11. This sequence doesn't vary. We just want to provide the multiplication table for a different number. So that's why we only use num in the print here. We always go from range 1 to 11. Python 3, main.py. If we run our code, so let's see the output for 2. Well, we get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Actually, why don't we make this print a little nicer? Let's have it actually write out what these numbers are. So num times I equals num times I. Now remember what I said about commas. Why am I using commas here? Why don't I have to cast these numbers to strings? Well, print is a function that can actually take multiple arguments. And if you give it multiple arguments, it'll print each of the arguments. It'll automatically convert each argument to a string and then add spaces in between them when it prints them. So if you give print multiple arguments, it will convert all arguments to strings and concatenate them with spaces in between. So if we run this code here, you should see, again for 2, 2 times 1 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, so on and so forth. I change this again, let's say 7. The only one I remember is 7 times 7 is 49. And 3 times 7 is 21. I remember that too. Let's see if I remember correctly. So 7 times 3 is 21. I have this a little backwards. Usually you have 1 times 7, 2 times 7. Let's swap them. So I times num. This will look nicer. 7. 1 times 7, 2 times 7, so on and so forth. Okay, one more problem before this video gets too long. I don't want to do that one yet. So this is a good one. Count the total number of digits in a number. So this will be problem 5. How do we do this? Well, I can think of a clever way to do this with one line. And let me see if you can think of it too. So let's take some input. We'll use the same string, take in this number, and I'll just print the number for now. If I run our code, 7, that just prints 7. Whoops, no surprises there. Can you think of a clever way to give me the number of digits in this number? Well, we learned about this len function. Why don't we see what happens if we try to do length of a number? 12. Oh man, so object of type int has no length. That's too bad. But you know what does have a length? Strings have a length. If only we had some way to convert an integer to a string. Oh wait, we do. And that's called casting. So how do we cast this integer to a string? We'll use the str function. So actually, now the length of the string version of the number will tell us how many digits there are in the number. So if I run this code, python3 main.py, I don't know, give me a number 24612, has length 5. That prints out 5. Okay. Thanks for watching this optional video. This is just some practice coding using the concepts we've learned so far, specifically loops, even though I solved this last problem without using a loop. I hope this is helpful, and I hope to make some more of these in the future. Bye.